T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
What's going on, everybody? Happy New Year and welcome to another episode of Kush's Corner on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, the coolest reptile network in the world. Today is a little solo episode, kind of 2025 year in review, last episode of the year, kind of going over everything that happened. It's been quite the year for me, ups and downs, but lots of cool stuff. So we're going to get into all of that. But before we go into that, of course, as always, US ARC. So US ARC is the organization that is fighting for our rights to keep our reptiles, to run our reptile businesses, to live this lifestyle. Check out usarc.org for everything you need to know about the organization. That website is where you can find alerts as to pieces of legislation, either new or existing, introduced either at the national level or at local levels, as well as updates on progress of any legislation. usarc.org is also where you can become a member of the organization. As a community, we have strength in numbers, and the more people that are behind the cause, the better. And here we are. Good morning to anybody who is watching this as it drops. This is a pre-recorded episode. I've just gotten lucky enough to where my two episodes these last couple of weeks have landed on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. So definitely not going to be doing those live. I feel like I would get maybe one viewer at best. Yeah, getting back to regularly scheduled programming next week. So here we are. If you are here on YouTube, as always, please subscribe to the channel if you are not already. A new podcast drops every single day of the week here on the channel from some of the best hosts in the game, talking about a wide variety of topics within the reptile industry. And if you are more of an audio podcast fan like myself, we are on all the major platforms, be that Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Play. Wherever you get your podcast from, you can find the Trap Talk Reptile Network. A follow and a 5-star review on any of those platforms would be most appreciated. So with that out of the way, here we are, man. Last show of the year. Kind of crazy to think about. This is the not quite second full year of doing podcasts. I think that, or of doing this podcast, that anniversary is going to be coming up, I think sometime near the end of February. And, closing in on episode 100, which is crazy to think about. This is 93 right here. And, I've been doing reptile podcasts for quite some time. I'm not sure if I've actually ever told this particular story, but I don't know if it ever aired, but I was technically a guest on a reptile podcast for the first time in, I believe, 2011. It was with one of my first mentors in herpetoculture, Josh Beatty, back in Chicago. He did Royally Addicted Radio for anybody who is newer to the reptile podcast world. These things have been around for quite a while, but the kind of new wave of the video audio streaming podcast has really been, it's come to the forefront really since like 2020 or so. I guess when we started Unfiltered in 2019, there was a video component, but before finding StreamYard, man, it was rough. There were a couple pretty rough episodes with the format, but yeah. So first podcast was all the way back in 2011, and then through high school, even before I was young at the time, 11 years old. But kind of once I was in high school, I really got like deep into reptile podcasting. Morelia Python Radio was the staple back then, as anybody who was around, in that time. So from like 2014 to 2018, I was in high school. And during that time, it was, it was always something that I had in my mind to do at some point, was to do a podcast in whatever format that ended up looking like. And it was, for me, like, all right, do I have anything really worthwhile to share? And then also, would I be a good interviewer? Because I'd never done it before. So I guess I kind of had like a real soft into doing podcasting, because back during the unfiltered days, as anybody who knows who was there for the first, maybe 10 episodes or so, I barely said a word the whole time, and which was okay, because the show kind of went on anyway. I was 9 o'clock Eastern time after working like a 12 to 14 hour day, and I was just exhausted and could hardly move. And I'm like, all right, now I got to go sit on a podcast for 3 hours. And questions were not being asked by me, and that was okay. I was lucky if I could get one or two in an episode, but it was an easy way to kind of get into it, learn how to feel comfortable on the show, also being comfortable in the silence of it as well, because, a major issue that a lot of podcasters will have is the inability to just kind of sit and listen and let the guest talk. They're reptiles and otherwise. Some of the podcasts that are the most unbearable to listen to are the ones where the host just can't get out of the way. So that alone, I feel like, really helped me. And then further progression into unfiltered, once like I was starting to get some of the guests for the show and had a little bit of a better grasp on how it was going, was able to, be more active. But obviously MJ was always the one who was leading the episodes. And then took a decent break from doing podcasts. I mean, probably a good 2 years, which, thinking about that now, seems absolutely nuts to not have done a podcast for that extended period of time, especially as a host. I think I kind of joined panel for one Trap Talk episode. But that was really it. So then once I moved here to Texas, once I was settled in, it was never a thought that was it for me, that I was done doing podcasts. And we kicked around some ideas, and then eventually, MJ came to me with this idea of doing a show here on the channel just my own. And I was really, I jumped all over that. I was like, oh, this is perfect. So yeah, I mean, the first few episodes, like, to think about where it is now compared to that, back then, is just, it almost doesn't even make sense to me that it came as far as it did. For anybody who was listening back in the early days, man, the first like 10 episodes or so, I just loaded that schedule up with like friends. So I was like, these are going to be easy shows for me, because I already know all these people. So, I kind of gave myself an easy route to get back into it, before trying to get on some guests who I was really, like, had as a top priority, but didn't know them personally, to be not only a comfortable interviewer to where I could like manage the episode, but also to where I'm putting out a good product as well. Because, man, I've then this is not a slight on anybody, but and not even necessarily all about reptiles, but I've listened to some podcasts where I see the guest, I'm like, oh wow, I can't believe this person's talking, and then just the structure of the interview is just not really what I would have hoped it was, and I end up like, man, I feel like that only scratched the surface on what that person had to offer. And I never want anybody who listens to one of my shows to come away kind of with that thought. So that was really important to me, is not only getting top quality guests, but then getting the absolute most out of those episodes, and selfishly for myself, and then also for everybody who listens as well. I don't want to say I'm necessarily a perfectionist, but I definitely enjoy being good at what I'm doing. So that was always something that was very important to me. So yeah, I mean, to start last year was like kind of like, all right, or I guess this year, feels like last year. My January feels like forever ago, but it was rolling at that point, and everything felt great. Like, it just became a regular part of my life. I kind of got a little picture slideshow to some of the highlights of the year I'm going to go through, but of course, reptile wise, at least for me, the first thing of the year that is always kind of, bookends the year before, starts that next year, is the Pomona Reptile Super Show. I went to the show for the first time in 2019, January of 2019. And I've been to most of them since the January show. I inevitably have missed a couple in there, but the last 2 years, and then coming up in a couple weeks will be 3 years in particular, definitely make the pilgrimage out there to Pomona. So that these are, a few cool snakes. This is an albino Cape gopher snake. So the vertebralis. This one wasn't for sale. There were some heads on the table, but I had never seen this in person before, so I definitely had to snag a picture. And then the atriceps, the really cool Pakistani snakes that start off looking like a diadem rat and then turn into this as the years go on. I had seen them before, but at this show, I really didn't have a great understanding of them. So to see like this adult in person was really, really cool. And then this is one of the pickups from the show, the Envy Snow San Diego gopher snakes from John Buckman. This is the male right here. And, looking at this picture a year later, the snake is so much bigger. It's just gorgeous, doing so great. The San Diego gophers were actually one of the few I had on my list of, if I find some cool ones at Pomona, I might be coming home with them. So was very glad that it all worked out that way. And then after the show with Alex Huang and their whole crew going whale watching, to no avail on the whale side, but we saw as many dolphins as one could possibly count. It was pretty incredible. We saw some of the seals as well. So that was pretty sick. And then coming back home after that was a pretty freaking cool sight. So this is literally the night getting home after Pomona, and there were a bunch of little baby tiger rat snakes out running around. So this was my first clutch of tiger rat snakes, and I've talked about that on here a couple times, as well as on some YouTube videos on my channel, Kush Reptile. Check it out if you haven't already. And so, this was a project that really had been a top priority for me for quite some time. So to finally have it actually work out was just an absolute dream come true. So these are my Veracruz tiger rat snakes. I had gotten my adults as kind of like sub-adults in 2021. So at this point, I had these snakes for quite a while, for the better part of 4 years. And I had gotten infertils in the past, kind of, in my enclosures weren't up to standard, I don't think. And just, moving the animals once, getting them settled back in, just for whatever reason, it just never worked out before. And my female cycled totally off season. She laid the clutch in October, when typically they're laying in like March, April. So I was surprised, but I was like, hey, I'll go with it. And the babies are just absolutely gorgeous. So the first day, 4 of them were out. The next day, the final 2 came out. And honestly, they weren't nearly as squirrely as I kind of expected them to be. I put them in this big tub in case they just all started to bolt, but they weren't very bad. I was, tiger rats are some of the fastest snakes out there. So I was expecting them to be all over the place, but not so much. And then day 2, this girl hatched out. She's my holdback that I kept from the clutch. And she was an absolute screamer. She's maintained a lot of that color as she has grown up. One of the downsides of Spilotes is that they do kind of, and I guess I'll talk about tiger rat snakes because the Sulfurious not so much, but tiger rat snakes will dull out a little bit with time, where when they're babies, they kind of have their most brilliant coloration. But the name of the game with them is kind of to, see how long you can maintain that color during their growth. So when I was first checking out these guys, it was like, all right, what's my holdback? What are the differences here? Kind of figuring it out. Turned out there was only one male. It was a 1.5 clutch. So that made the male holdback a pretty easy decision. But then on day 2, when she hatched out, I was like, all right, that's, that's a no-brainer. It's about as a no-brainer as it gets for me. So holdbacks were super easy from that clutch. And then now this is into February, and breeding was really picking up by then. As some of you probably know, I'm a little superstitious where I don't post anything about my breedings until I have babies in hand. So, this picture didn't show up anywhere until the babies hatched. But this is my Yucatan tiger rat snakes breeding. And what's really cool, I mean, there's so many things about spilotes are really cool, but they're very demonstrative breeders. At least the tiger rat snakes. I've heard that the sulfurious can be kind of secretive, but and I've yet to successfully produce them. So I guess I'll potentially find out for myself this year or 2026. But with these tiger rats, man, there is no mistaking it. Kind of like a viper where their tails just kind of like touch right at the cloaca. And they are just dragging themselves around the cage for long periods of time, sometimes multiple copulations during that mating session. And it's, really, really cool to see, especially I have them in big display cages in what would be my dining room. And, I'm just walking through, getting some water for some snakes or something like, whatever I may be doing, and kind of peek over the cages and I see this big old display going on. It's pretty hard to miss. So that was pretty cool. This is my South American Guyana locality spilotes pair. They copulated a handful of times. Unfortunately, the female gave me slugs. I think in hindsight, she was probably too thin. And especially after the podcast I did with Jason Hood back over the summer, I think I'm going to really up my feed for my females during breeding season this coming time. So, a lesson learned the hard way. She was a little bit skinny coming into the season, where my Veracruz Yucatan females had just pristine body weight. So, lesson learned, but hopefully then this year will be the year for them. The female slugged out 2 years in a row. So that's always a really unfortunate reality when that happens, but what are you going to do? And then scrub breeding. So this is the one of the locks that resulted in my F2 pairing that I've posted about, and I actually did a full podcast on it on here. And this was really one of the first legitimate shots that I had at F2 Barnecks. I didn't produce either of these animals, so I still have yet to produce any scrubs from offspring that I personally produced. So that, fingers crossed that 2026 is the year for that. But was not going to complain with this at all, especially the male had the rain line tracing back to the Barkers from the early 2000s, all that. Went over that in a podcast. So this is the first scrub python clutch of the year that I got, and it ended pretty terribly, frankly. So this is she unfortunately has passed since. She was a pretty old snake and never really recovered from the clutch. But the matriarch of what I call the melanistic line. So the daughter right here, the snake that you can see my cursor, that's her tail right there. That is a daughter of this girl right here. So she is probably still to this day the single darkest barneck scrub that I've ever seen. This was her obviously gravid on eggs. She looked like this every single day of the year, to where female scrub pythons will get really dark when they're developing, when they're hormonal, when they become gravid, and then their first shed after laying, all of their color comes right back. Not her. She stayed like this all the time, and she looked like this as a juvenile. So it wasn't like she hormonally shifted once she became an adult. But she gave me a clutch of fully formed eggs. Everything looked solid, and then took the old flashlight to it, and most of the eggs were empty. Some of them had kind of weak veins, and over the course of a few weeks, one by one, they all crashed and had nothing to show for it. So that was really unfortunate. I was hoping to get another round of offspring from her. That would have been 3 clutches with 3 different males in her lifetime. She has grandchildren here now, so I'm at least fortunate in that way, and a number of her offspring that I have raising up as future breeders or even current breeders. And then this is the first good clutch of scrub pythons that I got that resulted in actual babies. So, man, it's still tough for me to believe this one. Obviously, this is one of my female Halmaheras. This is one that actually was from Chad Brown that he sent here on loan, and she was and still is a very, very small scrub python. So in this picture right here, wrapped around the eggs, she's like just over 6 feet long, which is absolutely nuts to me for a non-Tannenbar scrub python to lay eggs at this small. And especially when you consider this is how massive the eggs are. So I was just in shock when I saw this, and I sent the pictures to, Blake Bauer and Shane Adamson, some of the people who had bred Halmaheras, and they're like, oh yeah, cool. I'm like, those eggs aren't alien eggs to you? And like, no, that's what they do. I'm like, oh shoot, I had no idea. So I guess I found out, you can hear it as much as, as you want, but then seeing an egg that is literally like the size of your hand, coming out of such a small snake too, was really shocking. So got obviously 4 eggs. One was infertile. One of them didn't make it very long into incubation, and then unfortunately, one of the babies was not viable in the egg. So I only got one baby out of the clutch, which is definitely better than none. But it was kind of bittersweet, bred a species that I had been hoping to for quite a while, but like literally the worst outcome aside from no success. And then this is the second female that I bred, and this is kind of like pre-ovulation stage for this girl. This is a kind of a funny but very frustrating story about how I got here. So I've had plenty of missexed Halmaheras in my day, this girl included. Was sold to me as a male, which I really needed because I had been pretty female heavy in Halmaheras. So in 2024, I had a female that I had raised up for 4 years, that she was about 2 years old when I got her. So she was probably about 6, and she was in great shape, cool, ready to go. Felt her developing some follicles. So I threw a male in with her and got absolutely nothing. Couple months later, I've been pairing, haven't seen anything. And my male is looking a little bit thick in the back third of his body. I'm like, okay, this doesn't seem right. So when I'm putting him back in his enclosure, separating them out to feed, I just decided to do a quick little palpation and bump follicles. Like, oh, okay, cool. Males don't usually do that. So at that point, it was springtime, and at least on the female that I had been attempting, she had kind of gone too far in her development to where she hadn't, she kind of needed to have been bred by then. She started to reabsorb her follicles. I'm like, all right, next year will be better. My females will be a little bit older. I'll know not to put my males or my females together. So come the end of 2024, I'm starting pairings, and I put this male in this picture with that same original female, and I see absolutely nothing. Early on, before females are developing, not seeing locks or not seeing attempts is not a rare occurrence with scrub pythons. But the males will usually at least really be keyed in on some sense in the enclosure. You'll see them be very intent on certain spots, tongue flicking very intently. None of these snakes were doing that whatsoever. So then literally the same thing that happened the year prior, I was putting this snake back into its enclosure for feeding. I'm like, let's just see. I start to palpate, follicle, and pretty developed as well. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't catch a break. So now I'm like, all right, I have 1 adult male and like 5 adult females. And I go, I'm like, all right, this is the last step. This is the last thing I'll do before I completely crash out. I had a female that I've been raising up that never really filled out in her back third. I'm like, that might be a male. Let me go check. So I probed it, swallowed the probe right up. I'm like, cool. So I'm about to pair my female that was sold to me as a male with my male that was sold to me as a female. What a time. But fortunately, they locked right up. And that did result in my second clutch of the year. Those two bred maybe 6 times that I saw. And, that was kind of like a super frustrating, but yet kind of worked out ultimately story. This is that Yucatan female who I showed locking up earlier. And you can literally see like one by one, the eggs stacked up inside of her. This was not long after her prelay shed. As you can tell, the skin is still in the enclosure. I hadn't even had time to pull it out yet. I think it was maybe a couple of days after. And I wasn't expecting her to lay so soon. We'll go to that in a second. I believe she laid within a week of her pre-lay shed, which is crazy for most snakes, considering that, you're typically looking at least like 2.5 to 3 weeks for some colubrids, a month or more on a lot of pythons. But just looking at her there, I'm like, how much more developed can these things get? These are like big eggs. So right around the same time, literally, for anyone who's watching, on the same day, or actually no, 3 days apart, my mistake. So, but right in the same kind of time frame, this is when I got my clutch of Aru scrub pythons. So this had been one for me that I had been really trying at for quite a while, and particularly with this female. This was the 4th year I had paired her up, and the 4th year she had developed follicles, and 3 prior to that of reabsorbing those follicles. And she's a big girl too, but she's very like long and slender. She's just shy of 12 feet long, but frankly, you look at her and think she could probably put some more weight on. So she had a small clutch for what I thought. She had 9 eggs, but they were all perfect. One thing that in hindsight, I think may have been the case that Ryan Young pointed out to me is that she may have only fired on one ovary. So this might have been a half clutch essentially, because a scrub python of her size, a 15 egg clutch is easy work. Upwards of 20 is definitely possible. So for 9 eggs to come out of this big female was a little surprising. I would expect a clutch like this more out of like an 8 or 9 foot female, but no complaints whatsoever. The clutch was perfect, full fertility. All of them went the distance. Only the 3rd time I've had that happen to me with a scrub python clutch, where 100% fertility and 100% hatch rate. And as I've said quite a few times on here, this is the first time that Aru scrubs have been produced in the US, and I believe only the 3rd time they've ever been produced in the world. So to me, that was super important, because Aru scrubs are very, very uncommon as imports. So to get some captive bred stock produced and held back, get a few animals out with some other people, to me was really important. And then just 3 days later, that female tiger rat snake laid her clutch. So let's see, March 17th to March 23rd. So I don't remember if that tiger rat picture was taken the day that she had her pre-lay shed. So right around a week after she had her shed. And beautiful clutch, just perfect eggs. Another one where I ended up getting 6 offspring out of it. She laid 7 eggs and 1 hatched out, with kind of an anomaly. I think I have a picture in there in a little bit. So that was right before kind of going out to the Dallas show, and of course stopping by at Reptilandia beforehand. This is one of the African dwarf crocs, one of my favorite crocodilian species. So whenever I'm there, that's one that I always have to check out. Sun gazer as well. Very rare you get to even see these in person. Nonetheless, so close up. So got to always appreciate them. And then was able to, for the first time in what I would consider way too long, get to visit my good friend Patrick Holmes and check out his collection, which is just absolutely nuts for anybody who is aware of Patrick at all. This is one of the McGregori that had been pretty recently brought into the U.S. from Europe after not being seen for quite a while. The white-faced McGregori are just absolutely ridiculous. So to be able to see that snake at Patrick's house, get some filming done. Did a couple YouTube videos with Patrick that ended up, being pretty popular, and I think really pretty spectacular videos as well, which it's hard not to be when you're filming a collection like that. And this is obviously some basin action right here. What's really cool about this girl, right, in particular, I actually sold that snake to Patrick. So really cool connection there. I was able to see a snake again that I'd had in the past and see that, good things are being done. This is that really insane blue and white Biak that kind of went viral for him for good reason. She was a little bit fired down, but so cool to see that animal in person. And I like this picture right here for a lot of reasons, but those 2 snakes that I'm holding are actually 2 snakes that I produced that ended up in Patrick's collection. So Mexican pine snake, and then a female scrub python from my first clutch of scrubs. So that was really cool. to see those two snakes again. I get a lot of gratification out of seeing animals that I produced in other people's collections. So that was a pretty amazing one. And then of course the patriarch of his divergens, the big male. I mean, shoot, that snake was probably about 8 feet long or so, just absolutely stunning. I believe, I mean, I think the sire of my female, so she's gorgeous as well. And then of course the Tropidolaemus laticinctus is a very unique viper in so many ways. Obviously coloration is very hard to beat on these. Their habits are super interesting as well. Just everything about their life is just slow. You know, they rarely eat. They have really slow metabolisms, and Patrick's had some really great success with them. So it was amazing to see those snakes. So after that trip, kind of getting into more colubrid stuff, I had brought everybody up out of brumation in the end of February. And then this was the first clutch that I had gotten, kind of scattered a little bit from a young female Kankakee bull snake. So, you know, it was great to get some eggs out of them for sure. Was really happy about that. This is another female, laid a much better looking clutch than that first one. I ended up getting a clutch from a third female as well that they all went bad. And then this is the one that myself and a lot of others were really waiting on. That's the Mexican pine snakes, the Jani. This was the third year in a row that I had produced from this pair, and I was so stoked. She had a much bigger clutch egg count wise than previously, where I believe in 24 she had 14 eggs and 12 of them made at the distance, where this year 12 of them made at the distance. I don't remember exactly. I think she had 15 that were good and 6 slugs. So I think she had 21 total ovum. And I think another case of I don't think I quite fed her enough through the process to fully support forming all of those eggs. So a little disappointing, but still a phenomenal clutch. Got some holdbacks out of it. And, you know, hopefully again, next year I can get some, I guess 2026. It's not quite next year yet. It'll be next year. If you were listening to this live or live when it's dropped, it'll be next year in 12 hours or so, or 15 hours or whatever it may be. Probably depends on where you are too. So anyway, beginning of May, got to visit with my friends Nikki and Taylor Justice out in Indiana. Could check out their animals. This is one of their cow retics. And, you know, I like to joke about retics, but you really can't deny the beauty of the cow retics. And these guys are always really incredible as well. You know, diamondback terrapins are just such an iconic turtle, especially in North America. So, you know, I'm not an aquatics guy myself. I've worked and kept plenty of them before, from turtles and crocodilians and, you know, aquatic monitors like Mertens. And I tip my cap to anybody who's willing to deal with all that water. I think, at least in the current state of my life, not so much, but seeing the diamondback terrapins was really amazing. And while I was gone, this girl, that second Halmahera, laid her clutch. So a little bit better. She had 7 eggs. 4 of them were fully formed and appeared fertile. Unfortunately, 2 of them crashed pretty quickly. So, you know, was faced with another kind of poor clutch from the Halmaheras, but at least I got 2 babies out of it. And then this was a much better clutch. So this was that F2, or I guess resulting in F2, F1 melanistic to rainline barneck scrub pythons. She was pretty small as well. She was, you know, about 8 feet when she laid, which is not tiny by any means, but definitely on the smaller end as far as what I have gotten eggs from in scrub pythons. So, you know, a decent haul of eggs. The clutch only ended up with 4, unfortunately, that did well. A 5th hatched, but that 5th one was really small and weak, and a 6th one was not viable in the egg. So 2 of the eggs, she laid 8. They were all looked good from the start. Actually, no, I'll take that back. There were 7 looked good from the start. This top egg right here was formed, but it was empty. So no embryo in there. One of them crashed during incubation, and then I had the little bit of an issue there at the end. So unfortunately, resulted in just 4 babies, but probably to this day the 4 nicest barn eggs that I've ever produced. So let's see, when was this? This was May 20th, so May 25th, only 5 days later, got the pip from the Halmahera. So yeah, seeing that was pretty incredible. Coming downstairs, peeping in the incubator, and just, kind of losing my mind a little bit. So just absolutely a dream come true to see that little baby Halmahera poke its head out of the egg. And there, a couple days later, there it was. So I was a little bit freaked. The snake had kind of tied itself up in its umbilical cord a little bit. So I kind of cut the egg open a little more to see exactly what was going on. After examining, and kind of came to the conclusion that though it was wrapped up in the umbilical cord, it wasn't overly tight. So I didn't want to intervene. I wanted to be able to get all of its nutrients, not have, not create a bunch of blood from the umbilical cord being cut prematurely. Can say I didn't sleep very well that night, but the next morning the snake was out of the egg. So it was kind of some relief there. There was a little bit of an opening, on its underside where its umbilical cord was, but just kept it clean, kept it on paper towels. And after the first shed, in particular, then after the second shed, fully healed up, never got infected or anything. So I was very fortunate. A water break. So then a couple weeks later, was very fortunate to be able to go out to Arizona, again, hang out with Alex, Renee, Brandon, the whole crew out there, and go herping, just hang out. Found this really cool clobber eye. Alex and Brooke found this really cool blacktail. Brandon took this awesome picture of it, and a few others as well with his camera. Really tiny blacktail, definitely was a baby from the year. So from the year prior, babies hadn't been born yet, but just a beautiful snake, really rich coloration, everything you kind of ask for from an Arizona blacktail. And then got a Sonoran gopher snake, actually just right off of a pretty busy trail, which is kind of cool. So yeah, really neat to see the Sonoran gopher, and then lyre snake as well. The next night cruising, pretty freaking sick. Also got to check out Alex and Renee's collection, which is just super eclectic, honestly, really more species than I can even really remember. Pi Musarana right here was one of the coolest animals for me. Got a couple really cool vlogs done with Alex when I was there as well. So for anyone who hasn't checked it out, I would highly recommend it. And then June 9th. Yeah. So the same day coming home, I see, good things for me seem to happen when I leave and then I come back home. Coming back to the first pips of the Arus, and I was just over the moon. This was one, like, maybe for me, man, the Halmaheras were up there too, but like the coolest moment I've had in herpetoculture was seeing these little babies pip. And what made it even better for me was that it was such a successful clutch compared to the Halmaheras, where like it was very bittersweet. This was just perfect all the way through. Nothing bad at all. I mean, like literally the worst thing that happened with this clutch, which you can't even count it as that, was one baby was like a little smaller than the rest of them and ate right away, and is maybe the second nicest of the clutch. So, so yeah, I pipped the rest of the eggs the next morning. There were a couple babies out, and they were just big, robust, very healthy babies. Maybe the healthiest I've ever gotten from a scrub python clutch, and it showed. I think 5 or 6 of them ate first try, and then the other 3 or 4 ate second try. So super easy. Some scrub pythons can be a little bit of a pain in the ass to get started, but I was actually very lucky this year. I really didn't have any pain in the ass. I didn't have to force feed any of the babies I produced, so got very lucky there. And man, just seeing the pile of baby Aru scrub pythons is just something I'll never forget, and I definitely want to experience again. And then very shortly thereafter came the tiger rat snakes. So this makes sense, yeah. So yeah, just man, I just couldn't have been couldn't have been any happier with how the tiger rats came out as well. Something that was really interesting about this clutch compared to the first clutch was that it took much longer to incubate. These babies, I mean, they hatched out in the same period of time as the scrub pythons did. They were laid at roughly the same time, 3 days apart from each other, and then started hatching 3 days apart from each other. So you could count the dates. I'm not going to do that right now, but roughly like 80 days or so, where the first clutch of tiger rats came out in 70 days. And the crazier thing about that even as well is that these were incubated a little bit higher than the tiger rats that hatched sooner. So you always think that the lower you have your incubation temperature, the longer incubation is going to take. Well, that wasn't the case here. So it was very interesting, and especially that it was that big of a difference. But in the babies, made no difference at all. The babies were super healthy, really about just the same result. And one thing that jumped out for me immediately was how they had some of this really cool neon coloration, especially on their heads here, where if you remember from way back in the slideshow, and then with the gravid female, the adults kind of have this like creamy ivory coloration to them. And I was expecting the babies to look like that. Just I had no reason to suspect otherwise. So the fact that they had this kind of neon to them was just very, very strange. And especially, I mean, look at that one, this one's head right here. That color is not present anywhere on the parents. So that was pretty amazing to see. Back to the Arus. So, it was pretty cool to have both the Arus and the Yucatans hatching out at the same time. I'm not going to lie. That was pretty freaking cool. It's cool to have everything spaced out so you can like really be like over the moon about one clutch at a time. But then when you double up on it, it does definitely double up on the excitement. I can say that much. So kind of let them chill in the egg box for a little bit. I kept the scrubs together for about 10 days or so. The tiger rats, I separated them out a little bit sooner. And then this is that last egg, the seventh egg. This snake never had a chance. I don't think it was ever actually alive, but a two-headed baby tiger rat snake was pretty nuts. So, I guess it would have been cool if it was actually structured to where it could be viable, but that's just to see that alone was pretty freaking cool. And this is that first baby Halmahera after it shed, and after it's eaten a few times, kind of becoming more robust. So was really happy at this point that opening on the belly had fully healed up. So I was getting much more confident in the viability of this baby. And so here's one of the baby kankakis. Unfortunately, I had a very low yield of them this year, despite having a few clutches. I think there was a few reasons for that. I think I've screwed up incubation a little bit and had, they were touching too much damp substrate at a lower temperature, where if that, I use the same kind of egg box setup I use for my pythons, but at an incubation temperature of sometimes 10 degrees cooler. So there was very little evaporation of any of that moisture happening. And I think it was kind of waterlogging some of the eggs. So lesson learned kind of the hard way. This year, if I get some more kankakee eggs, which I really hope I do, I definitely will be setting them up a little bit differently to try to prevent some of this from happening. But you live and you learn, I guess. This baby right here in particular is really, really beautiful, kind of really cool, tight banding, super dark, high contrast. And this was a real fucking kick in the nuts right here. This is the morning when I left for the weekend of Trap Fest and Summer Pomona / LA Pet Fair. And this was the third female Halmahera that I had bred. And it's happened to me before, and it'll happen to me again, where I have a female scrub python that is in the process of slugging out, and she's gravid. Because after female scrubs ovulate and go through their pre-lay shed, there's this period that happens every time where I just look at the snake and I'm like, are you actually gravid? Where they are, they're not swollen anymore. A lot of that inflammation from ovulation and pre-ovulation is gone. And now the ovum have either been fertilized or unsuccessfully fertilized, and now they're in the process of growing them to the point of becoming fully formed eggs. Well, at about the 2-week mark, after that pre-lay shed, you got a good idea of what's coming out the other side of that scrub python, where, it's not like a berm or a ball blood python where, there's going to be eggs that don't necessarily make the snake look much, proportionally giant in the back third of their body, where with a scrub python, at times you can damn near count the eggs just by looking at them. It was pretty obvious that she was going to slug out, and this came early from her due date. So timing really couldn't have been better, honestly, that I had something immediately to take my mind off of getting a pile of Halmahera slugs. So I will move past this picture because I don't like to look at it. When I was preparing for this podcast, getting all these pictures together, I realized I took like no pictures that weekend. But I think to me that is indicative of a lot of fun that was had when the last thing on your mind is to take your phone out and take a bunch of pictures. So Trap Fest itself was super fun. Getting to hang out beforehand was super fun. Lots of amazing people. That's one of my favorite weekends of the entire year. So definitely would not miss it. This one picture from the show was pretty cool. Really nice melanota that Dan Malari had on the table that was very tempting for me, but I ended up not getting to it quite in time. And then a little bit later, about a week or so after getting home, the Mexican pine started pipping as well. And these guys are, very fortunate that I just happened to luck into some really, really spectacular adult Jani to where people really like them. And, I really like them as well. So this year I promised myself I'd hold back a pair because I had yet to do that over the last couple of years. And man, after seeing some pictures of babies that I had sent out and seeing that one that Patrick had, that was from my first clutch. I very heavily regretted my decision to not keep any. So made a point to this year. And these babies are just phenomenal. What's really awesome for me about the ones that I produce is most Mexican pines are going to kind of go through like an ugly duckling phase when they're young, and mine do, but not as much. So they really are pretty beautiful from the jump. They obviously will continue to get better and better, especially over the first year and a half or so of their lives. But they're pretty nice anyway. So I was really happy about them. 12 babies. I think it was a 4.7 ratio, which that's 11, 4.8 ratio. So female heavy, and kind of always better than the other way around. So couldn't complain whatsoever from that one. And then some of the rattlesnake litter started happening. This obviously right here is not the greatest litter. You can see some slugs here and there. Only got one viable baby out of this litter. But then this litter was quite good. So this was a joint pairing I did with my good friend Kyle Vargas. And this is my female that he ended up breeding at his place. I took her back. She had her litter. And 4 really, really beautiful babies. All looks different from one another. So definitely a really, really good litter there. And then this was the litter that was the absolute best, was the maculosus, the Durango rock rattlesnakes. She had 8 babies that were all really beautiful, perfect, no slugs. This was the opposite, Tarahumara rock rattlesnakes, where she had 1 baby and a couple of slugs, and the baby seemingly ate a few of its siblings because this thing was an absolute monster. Where, that's an adult rock rattlesnake right there. This is a pre-shed, pre-first meal baby. Just an absolute giant. So that thing got all the nutrients when it was developing. So was back in Indiana. Got to see Nikki and Taylor again. Got to check out the new Cuban iguanas that they got. And Cyclura are just always so amazing. So it was great to see them as always. And then, man, right before Daytona is when the rest of the scrubs decided that that's when the hatching was going to happen. So this was, 2 days before the trip, and the Halmahera started to come out. Another really interesting one where they hatched much later than the first Halmahera at higher temperatures. So who knows? I had cut the eggs early just to see what was going on, and if I'm being totally honest with you, I was super paranoid, wanting to make sure that everything was okay, especially considering kind of the heartbreak that I had experienced so far with them. But both of the babies hatched. Both of them were healthy. They're doing phenomenally now. And right before leaving, literally the morning, because he's 5:18, and that was 4:47 p.m. The first bar neck had started to hatch out from the F2 clutch. So I cut all the eggs before I left. It was definitely not an easy thing to leave. So that was, that was what that was. My dad was here, luckily, watching over everything while I was gone, and he sent some pictures periodically, and I just had to kind of stare at them endlessly while I was in Florida trying to enjoy my time. But not that I wasn't enjoying it, but I couldn't take my eyes off of the baby scrub pythons. Speaking of Florida, man, I love Florida. If it wasn't for the draconian reptile laws in Florida, I would 100% live there. But no scrub pythons, no Steven. So that's that. This is the first time I had been to Florida, and specifically for Daytona, since 2020. And every year from 2021 to 2025, or up until 2025, I had found an excuse not to go to the show. So like one of my main goals for the year was like, I'm not going to find an excuse to not go to Daytona. So had a few days ahead of time there, arrived on Tuesday, and immediately went to see Chris Rice and check out the emeralds. And man, they did not disappoint whatsoever. Chris's collection is absolutely immaculate, and got to get a YouTube video in, which you guys should definitely check out. Emerald fans in particular, but really just anybody. So this was one of the Miss Willie line babies that MJ produced that ended up going to Chris. So it was really cool to see. I have a nice kind of little personal connection to those animals. I ended up trading MJ the sire, the dad that was a 50% Miss Willie line from Ryan Willison, for the male Halmahera that eventually sired my second clutch this year. He was just, I mean, he's the perfect Halmahera, just super high colored, gorgeous. So very much a win-win situation where we both got an incredible clutch and or litter out of that trade. And then this is the basin from Marshall Mendez that Chris had as well. Just some amazing, amazing snakes. And this is another picture that I got during my absence of the first baby Halmahera, fully out of the egg, kind of losing my mind. Part of me really wanted to be back, and then part of me also being very happy that I was in Florida. The next day, got to go to Socrates and check out his animals. I'd been there once before, a few years prior, so I was really, really happy to be able to check out his animals again. Basin was absolutely nuts. Also did a really incredible YouTube video there with him, which is still the most viewed video on my channel. And it makes perfect sense why it was, because snakes like that are pretty freaking eye-catching. So yeah, this is the thumbnail for the video, and it was a good choice because it was, if you like snakes and you see that snake on the thumbnail of a video, at least for me, I'd click on it. So I got to check out the emeralds, the chondros, and of course the Boland's pythons. For me, were the highlight. I love Boland's pythons. They're so freaking incredible. So then on the absolute other end of the snake spectrum, we got to check out Palm Beach colubrids. My good friend John Lohman. It was very nice to be able to let us come by, check out the animals. This is I don't want to get the ID wrong, but I believe the leucistic king rat, either the lemon or the leucistic, but I believe it's a leucistic. This is definitely got the master class in king rats, with hanging out with John for a day. But we did again an amazing video with him as well that I was very lucky, did very well, and it made a lot of sense because these snakes were freaking amazing. The bird snakes as well, just can't go wrong with them. Definitely one of the species that I've had in the past that I could definitely see myself having again in the future. And then of course I'm going to find the tiger rat snakes. It's just inevitable. So this is one of the Veracruz that he produced. I believe it was in 2023 he had his clutch of Veracruz tiger rats. So to me, really cool to see an unrelated breeding, and I was very lucky to be able to get a female from that clutch from him after this. So she is behind me right now, up above these cages. More bird snakes, of course. Just that really amazing, yellow and blue coloration, and seeing a pair like this together, man, I don't know how you can't just become obsessed with these snakes by seeing them. Just snakes like that, and they're well mannered as well. They're incredible. So huge shout out to John. It was really amazing to go check out his animals, and then met up with Alex and Renee, Scott, Brandon, the whole crew, Rob Christian as well. Went to St. Augustine Alligator Farm, which one of my favorite zoological facilities in the world. Been there a handful of times over the years, and I never get tired of going there. This is a freshwater crocodile, a young animal that they had raising up. Just an amazing facility. Just every species of crocodilian that you can have, they have there at St. Augustine. I believe these are the New Guinea crocs. Forgive me if I'm wrong. And of course, black caiman, one of, if not the most iconic crocodilian species in the world. Just that incredible. Their coloration is amazing. Their head structure is so cool. You can't see this kind of blotch pattern on their neck in this picture, but they can get upwards of 15 feet long. So sometimes even more. They're true dinosaurs. And then the show, this Daytona was my favorite reptile show I've been to, and I can't remember. Daytona is always so great for all the variety that you see at the show. A lot of colubrid breeders down there in Florida, and then obviously turtles, tortoises, lizards, everything that you can keep and breed outside that really you can only do in Florida. It's always so cool to see. This was Jason Hood's table, one of the Honduran striped Mexicanus that he produced this year. And then this was at Colubra, the Petius nigromarginata. Just one of the most amazing colubrids out there. I used to keep a pair of these and definitely miss them, but really awesome to see them in person. And then Louisiana pine snakes produced by Rob Nimmo. Rarely do you see Louisiana pine snakes anywhere. So to see them at a show like this in person, man, if I was a Florida resident, I would have come home with a couple of those. I can promise you that much. We have a distant Chris Foley out here in the corner. Had to include that for good measure. But yeah, man, just the thing about these reptile shows, that obviously going to the show, seeing the animals it's one thing, but the people is really what it's all about. They're my favorite times of the year for that reason alone, getting to see friends who are from all over the country that otherwise you rarely ever actually get to see, no matter how often you're in touch with them. What a time. I'll let this picture speak for itself. If you're not watching, you're missing out. So but yeah, picked up some cool snakes at the show as well. Got a really cool pair of bull snakes from Keith McPeak, and I had been eyeing these in particular for quite a while. So these are the Zipper MORPH Kingsville Red bull snakes. This is the female that I got, and it's crazy just to see this picture back from August. She looks completely different now. Her coloration has gotten really, really cool, orange red. I got her and a het male from Keith. I had been eyeing those particular animals that he's been producing for quite a few years now. So when I was finally able to actually get my hands on some, I jumped on that opportunity. And then, coming home from this trip, as much as it was, much as it sucked to leave Florida, I didn't particularly mind for this reason. So came back to the baby Barnecks and baby Halmaheras out. Was so cool. Just a dream come true. Both of these pairings, F2 Barnecks that have the rain line in them, and then also the Halmaheras. Not only did I come home to those two, I actually came home to a litter of ridge-nosed rattlesnakes as well. The Chihuahua ridge-nosed Silas. The ridge-nosed rattlesnakes are my favorite venomous snakes. So the first time I've ever been able to have a litter of ridge-nose was a special one. I'll definitely say that. It's one of the little babies, pre-shed. Another nice picture of the mom with one of the babies, or actually two of the babies you can see right there. So they're very well camouflaged in that enclosure. At first I thought I only saw one baby, and then I was like, oh, there's a second one. And then a couple of days later I saw the third one. So, it was pretty cool. that was 21st, and then quick turnaround to the Dallas Reptile Show weekend / Bill Stiegel's party. Ryan Young came out early. We did some herping out here in El Paso, and then we went to the Alpine Marathon area, do some herping out there. Went to Black Gap, did a bunch of cruising. Got some bunch of rattlesnakes. Not a whole lot aside from rattlesnakes. It was really interesting. Over the summer, we had some absolutely insane rains out here. So, these desert mountains were looking quite lush. It was pretty cool. Got a really cool prairie, blacktail. So we got a good variety of rattlesnakes, but rattlesnakes were what we saw, which I will never complain because I am obsessed with rattlesnakes. So we also got this really cool box turtle on kind of the morning of our way out as we were heading to Reptilandia, and got to spend a night and a full day there. These are the Thrassops, really amazing. Croc monitor, blacktail. For anybody who I coach whips in the background, for anybody who hasn't been to Reptilandia yet, I could not recommend it more. It's really just probably the most amazing reptile display in the United States, which is saying a lot because there are some cool ones out there. So yeah, that was kind of the end of the cool, fun goings on of the year. After that trip was kind of just, settling in after having been kind of all over the place in the summer, doing a lot of traveling, which no complaints whatsoever. I love it. But it was time to kind of lock in, get ready for breeding season. And, got quite a few pictures that hopefully I'll show you guys in the next year's wrap up that I'm not going to show quite yet from the end of the year. But another thing that, especially doing some of the traveling, seeing other collections, and then as a result of some of the poor clutches and litters that I had, I really made an effort, especially come like summertime, to reduce numbers of the collection, kind of move on some side projects that I know that I can eventually get back into if I really wanted to, and focus my attention on having fewer snakes and trying to have a higher percentage success rate out of those snakes, particularly getting, my focus heavily dialed in on scrub pythons, of course, tiger rat snakes, and then the Pituophis genus. So, I made a pretty good effort to get a lot of snakes rehomed, get them to some people who were really passionate about the projects. And frankly, I was able to get a lot of that accomplished. My goal, which I have yet to hit, but I think I'll be able to, is to get the collection down to 200 snakes, which is still a lot, but is not nearly as many as I had. So definitely was a lot of that in the mix here. And, was a good, I learned a lot of lessons this year, despite them having been lessons that I would have kind of preferred not to have had to learn. But bad clutches, bad litters, poor success with breeding will definitely make you think about it, especially if that is what you want to have be your income. So, but with that said, though, that was not my only justification or thought process. Frankly, for me, as I've continued to, reduce the numbers, I've continued to kind of have more enjoyment out of what I've done. And I haven't really moved anything that I think I could never get again. And a lot of the times they were going to people who I know, who I'm going to keep tabs on the animals. So it's bittersweet for sure, but I'm definitely at a point now with fewer animals that staying on top of everything week over week is really easy. And, for me, I hate being behind on my care. I love being on a routine schedule with them where I'm able to, really examine the snakes, have a good idea of how everyone is doing, be able to be on top of the feeding habits of every single snake. So, a lot less can go wrong when you're that dialed in with what you're doing. And I guess we'll see, I'll be able to say more in maybe 4 or 5 months or so, but hopefully that results in much more breeding success as well, which ultimately is, one of the main things that I'm doing. One of my main objectives is to have more success with breeding. So been it was quite the learning curve, the learning process of figuring that out. But like being at, seeing MJ's place, seeing how much success he was having with the green tree pythons, same with Chris with the emeralds, Socrates, John, like going to these people's facilities and seeing just what it's like to have a bit more of a dialed in approach, have either one or a few projects that are the main focus where a lot of attention is going to them. It shows in the results, frankly. And for me, if those main projects can be the animals that I enjoy the most anyway, then it's a win-win, where I get the most possible gratification out of the, getting the babies and the whole process of it, where, day to day, these are the animals that I most enjoy caring for, most enjoy interacting with. So, it was definitely, it's something I'm still doing as well. And also leaving open the possibility in the future that I could re-diversify at any point in time. So to me, I'm not cutting myself off from having a diverse collection, or a more diverse collection, I should say. I still have like 40 species, that are mid-30s species number. Still a lot, but not a lot considering that I was at like 100 a few years ago. So that's that. That's one of the main things that I was kind of doing this year. And I will say I do have some pretty big plans for the coming year. A couple of things that will be announced on the horizon, one in the near future, one in the slightly more distant future, but hopefully a couple of things going on that are going to be real big steps for me that I hope are successful. Hopefully they do well, and hopefully can bring value to people in the process. So excited for 2026. That is for sure. Kind of wanted to wind down on the episode with kind of going over some podcast stuff. It's hard for me to classify favorite episodes or best or whatever it may be, because frankly, I love all the shows that I do and all the guests are amazing, but figured I'd give you guys some highlights, especially for anybody who is potentially newer to the show and hasn't seen or heard some of the kind of archival episodes that I've done. This was earlier on in the year, one of the early episodes, and with the Python King himself, Ryan Young, where the topic of the episode was, as you can see for anyone who's watching, of designing a reptile building, because Ryan essentially was able to do that from scratch. And I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but what I've seen in pictures and talking to him, it's like, he really did it the way that a lot of us should strive to do it, who plan on designing a reptile building. And so that was about 2 hours of reptile building talk and an hour of scrub python talk at the end. So for those two reasons alone, that was a top episode for me. This was another episode that was just fantastic. A very long episode too, but a round table with Patrick Holmes, Kyle Vargas, and Mark Bailey about breeding rodents. So not necessarily the most glamorous topic in the world, but an absolutely paramount issue when it comes to being a snake breeder, where sometimes your biggest expense can be your feeders, and if you can take that biggest expense and turn it into either a minor expense or even a revenue generating source, then that'll do absolute wonders for you in your your business. If you're doing it in any sort of business, whether it's a full-time endeavor. If you're doing it full-time and you're not breeding rodents, frankly, you're probably not successful. And if you are doing it part-time, if you want to make any money whatsoever, you probably need to be breeding rodents. So, and the episode was really framed around doing it at a small scale, to where you're not taking on some sort of massive time, what am I blanking on? Like, where your timing isn't just massively. Oh, you know what? I'm tripping right now. I pulled the wrong thumbnail. Marshall Mendez was on this show as well. This was a super panel. So shout out to Marshall. Sorry. Imagine Marshall's face right here in the corner of the thumbnail. That is where Marshall actually was. So Marshall was on the show as well. So definitely a good variety within the show too, where Mark, was a successful rodent breeder at a large scale for decades, where, Kyle primarily breeding mice for rattlesnakes on a small scale. And then Marshall primarily breeding rats for pythons on a small scale. And then Patrick, where he's exclusively ASFs. So a little bit of everything in the episode. Again, apologies to Marshall. Imagine Marshall with sunglasses on right here in the corner. Okay. This is another really great one from not too long ago, earlier on in the fall, where it was Nick Mutton and Brandon Wheeler, kind of not necessarily a debate episode, but kind of, kicking around different philosophies when it comes to pythons. Obviously, someone like Nick has been doing this a whole hell of a lot longer than me. So I did a lot more listening than talking in the episode, where Brandon was kind of the co-host / mediator of the episode. So, I think we eclipsed the 4-hour mark on that podcast. That was a pretty good one. For anyone who hasn't watched that yet, highly recommend it. This one was one that was really cool for me. A shorter episode, but one of the better ones, I think, just jam-packed with information, was Jay Jacoby talking about pine snakes. So, I'm obsessed with Pituophis, and especially over the last few years, I've really dove deeper into them. And for anybody who knows anything about pine snakes, Jay Jacoby is the guy. So to get him on the podcast was really amazing. Hopefully I can do that again at some point, do another episode with him. So for any pit fans, colubrid fans, that's a must check out. And then, very recently, of course, one of my most recent episodes was with Craig Trumbauer. He was one of the guests who, from day one, when I, made like my list of dream guest, was right up there at the top. And man, it did not disappoint. Potentially the best podcast I've ever done. And that's saying a lot, because I've done a lot of really fantastic podcasts. So man, for anybody who hasn't checked out that episode with Craig Trumbauer, you got to do it. It wasn't a 4-hour marathon. So it's definitely a much more manageable listen than some of these other podcasts, where the one with Ryan was over 3. The one with the panel with all 4 of those guys was, I think, over 4, or right around 4. The one with Nick was right at 4. So a much more manageable listen here. And then, man, 1A for best podcast I've ever done was this one with Vin Russo and Chris Rice. I think we were right up at that 4-hour mark too. So, man, I was super proud of that episode. We really we did some good stuff that day. So that was fantastic. Obviously, man, our thoughts are all still with Vin about the tragedy. This was, I guess, for the sake of the episode, fortunate that it was before that. So, got to talk to Vin in full passion mode, where all, had his projects up and running. And, obviously wish him all the best with kind of getting everything back going to where it was. But man, if you guys didn't check out this episode, you got to do it. This episode was absolutely fantastic. So like I said, up there potentially with the best podcast I feel like I've ever done. And then, a few YouTube shout outs right here at the end. So that was one of the big things that really changed about my life, my career, however you want to say it, was that I started a YouTube channel right at the beginning of the year. And I've, fortunately haven't missed a week since. So that's been something that I've been really trying to stay consistent on. And in that time, man, there's been a few videos that for me have really, really stood out. A lot of them being collection tour videos. And this one with John Lohman, Palm Beach Colubrids, was freaking fantastic. Just, a lot of colubrids that you're not going to see people sharing otherwise. And not only that, his building is just spectacular. I mean, really, like, John was able to build your dream snake building. Just phenomenal. A lot of space, big enclosures, a lot of floor space to work with, very not crammed at all, tall ceilings, really amazing, air system, ventilation system. So that one you definitely got to check out. As I alluded to earlier, still to this day, the most viewed video on my channel was the video with Socrates, checking out his collection, and goes without saying as to why you need to do that. Just some of the coolest arboreals you can see. This is one of the videos that did the best of the ones that I put out, just of my own animals. And, not only just because it had a high view count, because I think it was really a very useful video, was going over the Pituophis genus and explaining a lot of the reasons why I think there are some of, if not the best pet snakes out there. And apparently a lot of people agree with me because had a lot of good feedback from the video. So I'm always really grateful when the videos that I do have a good effect. So I was very happy with that one as well. So check that one out if you haven't already. This video right here was pretty much why the video that I wanted to make when I started my channel. One of the concepts that was the driving force of getting it going. So the scrub python complex is one that is complicated and is still kind of in flux, still figuring out exactly what's what, what's where. We don't even know. There's some out there that we definitely haven't seen yet, or some that have been somewhat recently discovered to, Western science. And when I was first getting into scrub pythons, there was a lot of talk and a lot of debate as to exactly what is what. What locality is this? What species is this? What? So for me, I'm like, man, if I could have watched a video back then where somebody laid out animal by animal, these are the scrub pythons. This is what this is. This is what this is. These species, these localities, this is where these come from. This is where these come from. This is how big these get. That would have been, I would have watched that video over and over again. So that's what I did. That was one of, I think maybe my second or third video. And another one where I definitely got a lot of good feedback on it. So I was very proud of how the video came out. So any scrub python fans who haven't checked that one out, definitely do. And then another collection tour that I absolutely loved. It was a two-parter, was with Patrick. So, and all the collection tours I did were great, be it with Chris Rice, with Alex Huang, with Ryu from Reptilandia and Blackstone Exotics, some Nikki and Taylor Justice. I always loved seeing friends' collections, and then also now to be able to have the ability to help promote what they're doing as well is something that I'm really fortunate to be able to do. So I was really happy to be able to do that. But man, check out the videos of Patrick. If you like venomous, if you like chondros, if you like mangrove snakes, scrub pythons, that's one you got to do. So that's the end of my slideshow. That's the end of my ramblings, I guess, for the time being. Thank you to everybody who checked out this episode, man. Thank you to everybody who's been along for the ride with me. I'm super, super fortunate for every single one of you. If it wasn't for everybody who supports what I'm doing, I wouldn't be able to do it, straight up. There's no two ways about that. So a lot of gratitude from me. It's been a year of ups and downs. It's been a lot, but we're here. We've made it to the end of the year, and I'm excited for 2026. So I guess, yeah, for me, if you want to keep up with everything I have going on Instagram at Scrub Shepherd, Stephen Kush on Facebook. If you want to check out the Somalia group on Facebook, that is the Scrub Python and Bolin's Python group that I run over on Facebook. Got a really cool community over there. My YouTube channel is Kush Reptile. If you haven't already subscribed, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe over there. I drop new videos every single Friday on that channel. I'm on MORPHMARKET as well. Only have a couple listings up still right now, but Kush Reptile on MORPHMARKET. And I'm here every Wednesday, man, on the Trap Talk Reptile Network for Kush's Corner. And I not going away anytime soon. I'm every week I'm watching that number tick up and up, and I can't believe that it's almost at 100 episodes. So before too long, it'll be episode 100, which is just crazy to think about. I have no idea how that even happened. So, but hey, I'll take it. Here we are. We're approaching 100. I'm excited for Pomona in a couple of weeks. Hopefully I can see a lot of you guys there. I will be with MJ and with MORPHMARKET at Pomona. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the Bears winning the NFC North, man. We're going to have home playoff games in Chicago. That's going to be freaking awesome. I know a lot of you probably don't care about that, but if it works out that way, if you don't see me at part of the day, Saturday or Sunday at Pomona, it's because I'm watching the Bears game. So that will be my priority that weekend. But yeah, so thank you to everybody for the continued support. And yeah, we're only scratching the surface. So I guess I'll wrap up here before I ramble on for too long. But Happy New Year, everybody. Hope you enjoy the day, enjoy the night. And here's to a good 2026. Catch you all back here next week for live episodes. Live episodes are back next week, back to normal. All right. See you, everybody.